Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Barr, do you know of any instance in which anybody has tried to interfere in Mr. Muller's investigation?
No, I mean, I'm not in the Department of Justice, and I have I'm not privy to that information, but I don't know of any.
I understand you know Mr. Muller, do you?
Yes, I do.
Is he big enough to take care of himself?
He's a Marine.
Yeah. Someone had tried to interfere with his investigation. Based on your knowledge of Mr. Muller, would he have something to say about it, including but not limited to in a court of law?
Yes, Senator.
I want to try to cut through some of the innuendo here. Did President Trump instruct or ask you, once you become Attorney General, to fire Mr. Muller?
Absolutely not.
Did he ask you to interfere in Mr. Muller's investigation?
Absolutely not.
Has anybody in the White House made that suggestion to you?
Absolutely not.
Has anybody in the Western Hemisphere made that suggestion to you?
Absolutely not.
Okay. I want to associate myself with the remarks of Mr. Blumenthal about the FBI being the premier law enforcement agency in the history of the world, in my opinion, in the high esteem in which we all hold the Department of Justice. But I have a question for you. This counterintelligence investigation that was started by FBI and Justice allegedly about President Trump. How did the New York Times get that information?
I don't know, Senator.
Well, didn't it have to come from the FBI, the Department of Justice?
I just can't say. I don't know how they got it, and I don't know whether that's an accurate report.
Right. What do you intend to do about the leaks coming out of the FBI and the Department of Justice?
The problem of leaks is a difficult one to address. I think the first thing is to make it clear that there's an expectation that there are no leaks, and punish people through internal discipline if there are leaks. Also, keep exercise more compartmentalization and discipline, and make the institutions that are responsible, if you're talking about the FBI, that their leadership is taking aggressive action to stop the leaks.
Okay. You've had some experience with the enforcement of our immigration laws, is that correct?
That's right, Senator.
Do you believe it is possible to secure a 1,900-mile border without, in part at least, using barriers?
No, I don't think it's possible.
Okay.
When I was Attorney General, we had the INS as part of the department, and I remember another part of my kibitzing was trying to persuade George W. Bush's administration not to break that out. But in those days, I had some studies done, and I was trying within the budget to put as much as we could on barriers as we could.
Okay. Do you believe that ICE should be abolished, as some of my colleagues do?
Certainly not.
Okay. You're Roman Catholic, are you not?
Yes, I am.
Do you think that disqualifies you from serving in the United States government?
I don't think so, no.
Okay. Why is that?
Why doesn't it disqualify me?
Some of my colleagues think it might.
Because you render under Caesar that which is Caesar's, and unto God that which is God. And I believe in the separation of church and state. And if there was something that was against my conscience, I wouldn't impose it on others. I would resign my office.
Yeah. I think it's called freedom of religion,
Yes,
as I recall.
that's right.
If the federal government threatens to withhold federal money from a university, if that university doesn't investigate, prosecute, punish sexual assault in a way prescribed by the federal government, does that make the state university a state actor, or the university a state actor?
It may. I would have to look at the cases. I'm not up to speed on those, but I would think so.
Well, if the federal government says to a university, look, if you do not prosecute, investigate, punish allegations of sexual assault in a way that that the federal government says you must, otherwise we're going to take away your federal money. Does the accused in one of those sexual assault allegations still have the protection of the Bill of Rights?
I would hope so.
Should he or her?
I'd have to look and see exactly the state actor law right now. But what you're getting at is, the rules that were forced on universities in handling sexual harassment cases.
Right.
That I felt essentially did away with due process.
Yes.
And I think the victim, as a father of three daughters, I take very seriously any question of sexual harassment. It's a serious problem, and the word of a victim has to be taken very seriously, and it has to be pursued. But we can't do it at the expense of the Bill of Rights, or basic fairness and due process.
Both the accused and the accuser deserve due process, do they not?
That's right.
Okay. Tell me what the legal basis is for a universal injunction.
I think universal injunctions are have no. Well, let me say that they are a recent vintage. They really started arising in the '60s, and I think that they have lost sight of a limitation on the judicial power of the United States, which is case or controversy.
It's all based on the D.C. Circuit
Right.
case, the Wirtz case. Is that right?
I forgot the name of the case, but I think the D.C. Circuit case was the first one. I think that was in the '60s, and people have lost sight of the fact that it's really a question of who gets the relief in a case. And under the case or controversy, it should be limited to the parties. And when earlier you could have a court in one jurisdiction decide it, and that would be the rule in that jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. But that didn't debar the government from continuing its policies elsewhere, and eventually you'd get differences, and they would work their way up to the Supreme Court. So I think that I'd like to see these universal injunctions challenged.
Well, I don't know how many federal district court judges we have. Let's say 650. As I understand it, one can enjoin a congressional statute nationwide, even if the other 624 judges disagree.
That's right.
All right.
And not just a statute, Senator. I think what's different, what we're seeing is the willingness of courts to set aside, even the kinds of exercises of national security power that, 20 years ago would have been unimaginable for a court to challenge. And yet a district court judge somewhere can enjoin some action that has a bearing on the safety of the nation. And then the judicial process can take years and years to get that up to the Supreme Court.
I've just got a few seconds left. As I understand your testimony, General, Mr. Muller will write a report, submit it to you as Attorney General, and then you will write a report based on that report and release your report. Is that right?
That's essentially it, but I wouldn't assume, it could easily be that the report is communicated to the department before, assuming I was confirmed. That could be a month away.
Well, let me tell you what I'm getting at. I've got 6 seconds. Now 4. The American people deserve to know what the Department of Justice has concluded. And they're smart enough to figure it out. I've said this before. The American people don't read Aristotle every day. They're too busy earning a living. But if you give them the facts, they'll figure it out, and they'll draw their own conclusions. Doesn't matter who spins them. They'll figure it out for themselves. And I would strongly encourage you to put this all to rest, to make a report, a final report, public, to let everybody draw their own conclusions so we can move on. If somebody did something wrong, they should be punished. But if they didn't, let's stop the innuendo and the rumors and the leaking, and let's move on.
I agree, Senator. And let me say, earlier I misspoke because the acting Attorney General is Matt Whitaker, and I referred to Rod as the acting Attorney General. But in fact, the report would go to Matt Whitaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.